To a shy person, the biggest nightmare of the week is coffee hour. Before I was a minister, I coped with coffee hour by intently studying the bulletin boards. Here we go. And by talking with the person who was serving the coffee about the different kind of teas they might have, and discussing books with the volunteer librarian. After I became a minister, I came to the sudden realization that my job was to go up to perfect strangers and start conversations with them. Whew, it's a good thing y'all are such nice people. I would have had to give up this work long ago. Anyway, like most introverts, I learned quickly that people love to be asked about themselves. And I learned to spend my coffee hour asking people I didn't know very well, so what brought you to this church? Of course, I hear all kinds of stories from I grew up in this church to this is my first visit and I live in the neighborhood and it's the only church I can walk to. In between, what I most often hear is something like this. I've been coming for a while, and the first time I came, I was so struck by this mural, and I knew this was the place for me. Does that sound familiar? I wonder how many people here might tell a story kind of like that. Go ahead, you can raise your hands. This mural is an important part of who we are as a congregation. It's a set of 5,000 wood blocks which depict some of the world's religious symbols, which were considered important in the middle of the last century, as well as a few, like the heart down here, which was the icon of the artist, and the star, which he also considered very important. The artist was Santa Fe design professional Alexander Girard. Best known for his fabric design in the 1960s, he also collected folk art, and his collection of folk art forms the basis of the Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe. The wood for the mural was all used wood, was collected from the environment, which makes this must be one of the world's first recycled art projects. Girard's son did most of the collecting, as they have told us when they have occasionally come in to bring their children to show them this work. And most of the wood came from fences, barns, doors, and roofs of abandoned buildings in the Jemez Mountains. No wood was painted for this mural. All the color you see up here is house paint, creosote, stain, and natural weathered wood, just as it came out of the environment of New Mexico. The building committee for this building showed Girard two pieces of art which the congregation had already produced. One now hangs in the office and depicts a variety of religious symbols crafted in ceramic by member Carl Pock, who taught ceramics at UNM, and a mosaic done by a class of high school students in the 1950s, which depicts the symbols of the world's religion, which now hangs in the foyer of the RE building. Girard made a plan and crafted the symbols. Church members cut the wood squares. We've been told that the symbols arrived backed on plywood and that the plywood was affixed to the wall and the blocks put around it. We know that the background blocks were fixed directly to the wall because we have re-glued many of them, perhaps all of them, back to the wall over the years. This mural is part of the living life of this congregation. It resides not in a museum, but in our living room, so to speak. That means it's been dinged by musical instruments during concerts and by shepherds' crooks and stables during Christmas pageants. I think it has faded somewhat, even in the time I have been here. Its first caretaker, Nick DeLawless, confessed to me that in the process of gluing back a whole group of pieces which had come off in the space of a week, one had been misplaced, and he had created a new one for that space in his workshop. Since Nick's death, various staff members and volunteers have glued pieces back when necessary, as it often is. And if you look carefully, you will see that not all were put back with the grain pointing in the right direction. In the mid-1990s, a group of women led by Eleanor Bailey looked over the mural and concluded, rightly, that it partook in the masculine bias of its day and was lacking in symbols of earth-based and feminist spirituality, which were important to them. They also noticed a lack of Native American symbolism and the symbols of science, reason, and intellect, which are so important to this congregation. So that group and some other fabric artists produced the 4 banners which hang in the corners of the rooms over the doors, which depict some of those left out symbols. As a part of the living life of the congregation, the mural can be a part of our own increasing wisdom. After 9/11, while researching Islam, I discovered that what the artist thought was a symbol of Islam, the star and crescent over the piano over here, is not actually a religious symbol, but rather is a political icon from the Ottoman Empire and its successor nations. And because the star and crescent are symbols associated with pagan and goddess worship, Islamic religious authorities have consistently rejected this icon as a religious symbol. So we have on our mural a kind of embarrassing mistake, but we love it anyway. And this mural is not just an artwork which depicts symbols. It is in itself a symbol of the liberal worldview that finds truth in many places and keeps an open mind to what is new. And what's a symbol? A symbol is a graphic with depth, with emotional meaning. A graphic that doesn't just work on the eyes and the mind, but on the psyche, the intuition, the heart. In contrast to an icon, a logo, or a mere sign, which simply impart information, a symbol reaches out and grabs us. Consider this. Some Sunday morning you come to church and a vandal has sprayed our glass doors with his initials, KK. What a stupid, ridiculous trick. We lament the state of the world, we sympathize with the janitor, we go on with our business. However, if you came to church one morning and the doors were sprayed KKK, that's suddenly a much bigger deal. This actually happened in my first church, which was in South Carolina, where the history of the Ku Klux Klan was still a very present part of the society. I could hardly get the congregation to come in the defaced doors. Little knots of people stood around the yard, talking uneasily. It was probably just kids. They tried to tell each other, obviously not believing themselves. They debated calling the church's African American members to save them from the distress of finding their safe church so defiled. A reporter came from the newspaper. We got on the radio. The people of the congregation talked about that morning for years. What's the difference between 2 Ks and 3? 2 Ks is a sign. It's just a shortcut to somebody's name. 3 Ks is not only the name of a group, but a symbol of racial hatred and a dark side of American society. A symbol points to something beyond itself. A cross to the Christian faith, the flaming chalice to Unitarian Universalism, the flag to the nation and values it stands for, but a symbol further participates itself in the reality that it points to. The cross actually depicts the Christian understanding that the divine is not only found above, but with. The chalice bowl holds the flame of truth, warms our hearts with its light. We don't just see symbols. They interact with us. They touch us. They teach us. Consider the yin-yang with its overlapping and interconnecting circles of wholeness and the undulating differentiation of light and dark, neither of which is complete without the other. A profound symbol, wise in all times, comforting especially in bad times. It reminds us of the necessity of balance and the impossibility of unity. Which symbol, I wonder, up here, do you find yourself drawn to? The star? The gate? The lotus flower, which blossoms, though its roots are in the filth and muck at the bottom of the pool? One of the crosses? Our members who worship with us by video in the branches tell us that they feel very drawn to this little star back here, which is the only thing they see of the mural in their picture. The mural as a whole is a symbol. Its graceful intersections of symbols and background say to all who come into this room that here we reverence the religious intuition of all humanity, that we honor truth wherever it happens to be found, that we have open minds. This mural hints powerfully at one of our operating principles, that since the truth is larger than any of us can grasp, we are better off together, talking things over, exploring our faith in community in the most expansive way we can. This mural says that we believe that there is truth to be found everywhere and that respect is due to many different ways of being religious. Soon after this mural was put up in 1964, our denomination as a whole went through a major shift of theological emphasis. Many, perhaps even most UU churches began to be places where only one kind of religiousness was honored, the humanist or atheist kind. Being a non-creedal faith, of course, there was always a variety of beliefs around. But the center of our national life together became mostly devoid of God talk, spirituality, or appeals to the transcendent. Instead, our national, and in most places our local focus, was on changing the world, organizing for civil rights, against the war in Vietnam, for women's rights, all that shaded through the 70s into human potential, human growth and fulfillment, and so on. All of these are very good things, of course, but they are only pieces of a holistic understanding of what the religious life might be. And as the 1970s ended, many young ministers felt that things were out of balance and began to start working to find expressions of the Spirit that felt authentic to UUs and struggled to help congregations embrace a little more religious diversity and open-mindedness. In many places, they encountered major opposition, endured church fights, lost their jobs. Change is very hard. Through all this time, this congregation had its triumphs, trials, and tribulations, and every week, even during the years in which the worship service consisted of only classical music, announcements, and a sermon about the woeful state of the world, for a while, even the taking of an offering was considered too religious for this congregation. During all those years, the gathered congregation gazed at this mural, week after week, a mural that reminded them that there are many truths, many ways of being spiritual, faithful, and wise. So when my predecessor suggested that the congregation begin singing hymns together, some people grumbled, but the place did not go up in smoke. And when the interim minister in 1987 brought the chalice in from the Sunday school and started lighting it at the beginning of the service each week, people kind of liked it. And when the search committee introduced a candidate whose main achievement of her young career had been helping a small church in South Carolina grow by finding ways for UUs to explore faith and spirituality together, the congregation agreed to give her a try. This open-minded attitude was not a universal part of Unitarian Universalism in those days. It still isn't a universal part of our faith, but it's solidly a part of our life here. And I'm firmly convinced that our willingness to explore is the major reason our church has been able to serve ever more people in an era in which most liberal churches are shrinking. And I give a lot of credit to that, to this mural, and the way it's worked on our minds and hearts during almost 50 years. This congregation has thrived. We're about double the size of the congregation which built this building in the early 1960s. Now, some of us worship at a third service here. Some worship in our branches in Socorro, Edgewood, and Carlsbad using video. We need a bigger sanctuary. We need a sanctuary which is a little more friendly to video production. We want to be able to send a really good picture to our branches. And we need to be able to adjust to younger generations' preferences for images as well as words and music as learning tools. And that means a projector and a light-controlled space. And in spite of the difficult economic times we find ourselves in, this project has been a very popular one. We've already raised more than $1 million towards the project, which we celebrated last week. We expect to more than double that in the next few weeks. And one question which has arisen over and over during this process is, what will we do with the mural? And now that the city has approved the basic footprint of our master plan, the time has come to turn our attention to the inside of the new building. We've mostly assumed, I think, that the mural is an essential part of our worship life, a fixed item that should go in the new sanctuary exactly the way it was in this old one, so that we can continue to see it from the same angle that we're used to and in exactly the same way. And it turns out, isn't change always like this? It turns out that it's a little more complicated than that. Turns out you can't just transplant a piece of art into a different place and plunk it down and have it work exactly the same way. And maybe it also turns out that we don't need the mural to play the same role in our future as it played in our past. Or maybe we do. So there are possibilities, pros and cons, things to think about and decide. And now that we are really starting to think about it, we remember that this is a kind of awkward shape, which really takes up a lot of space. It's one of the reasons that this pretty large room doesn't hold as many people as it might. So we are in the next month stopping to ask ourselves what this mural means to us and how it might be best a part of our ongoing life in the future. There are several possibilities, some pretty creative. It's possible that the best possibility hasn't been thought of yet. You'll hear in a moment about opportunities to be a part of the design team's deliberations about the mural. Last week's flap over Facebook changes reminded me that one of the watchwords of my life goes like this. Most people spell the word change L-O-S-S. Our brains seem to be wired this way. And I don't know about you, but I have noticed that even the most welcome and happy changes inevitably bring some sadness, some leaving behind, some moving on. Maybe you're feeling about the idea of any change in the way the mural functions in our congregation's life. And if so, I honor that, for it means that this mural has been important to you. Another watchword of my life is this: at the bottom of God's pocket is change. A whimsical reminder that change is the deepest reality of our lives, and that our health and our happiness and our wisdom depend on our faithfully living that reality. We belong to a faith that looks to the future. We believe that revelation and truth-finding are ongoing parts of our lives and the life of our species. And that means new truths, new insights, new symbols, new ways of being faithful to the values of our lives, new places and ways to worship. This mural is a piece of who we are. It's 5,000 pieces of who we are. A living symbol, dinged, flawed, beloved, and as we grow, it can grow too.